In wildlife photography, the possibilities for editing are endless. Sometimes simple can work, but simple may lead to a lack of visual impact. This is when it pays off to be creative or experimental, if you will. In this video, I'll show you the full Lightroom edit on this lion cub, creating the visual impact I want through some very creative editing techniques. Okay, so to start with, like normal, Adobe Standard, and I'm going to drop the exposure a bit because I think the overall exposure is quite bright. I'm going to raise the blacks, I'm going to raise the whites to bring in some more contrast, holding down Alt to make sure I'm not blowing any detail out. And my intention with this is to go a bit darker and emphasize the light coming from the left and make it a bit more moodier. So something around about there to start with. This bright part of the foreground is distracting, so I'm just going to darken that. You don't always have to get rid of something if it's distracting. You can darken it down and it normally does quite a good job. And this stick poking out of the lion's back is incredibly distracting and looks almost like a tail, so I'm definitely going to get rid of that. But I think before I do that, I want to crop the image. I want to make the subject larger in the frame, and I think I might use a 4x5 crop here. I'm going to place the eyes and the lion directly in the middle of the photo, but have the eyes on a rule of third there. So now we've just got that stick to deal with instead of that whole branch. So what I'll do is going to go to Content Aware Remove. I'm just going to zoom in to 100%. Make the brush a bit smaller and click and drag and see. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I want to emphasize the light coming from the left-hand side. So to start doing that, I'm going to use a linear gradient. I'm just going to darken down this side of the image slightly and then brighten up the opposite side of the image. Just a little bit there. And I might just increase the blacks as well, slightly. And then I think the foreground needs darkening a little bit more. I'm just going to change the size of that. Just move that up there, around about there. That's looking good. I'm happy with the overall balance in the image. I'm going to do some local adjustments to the exposure. I want to darken this down still quite a bit. Raise the blacks a little bit here. And now basically emphasize a bit of light coming from the left-hand side using a radial gradient. I'm going to zoom out just to see where I can place this gradient off the image. Using only the edge part of that radial gradient. You can see that's before and after, just emphasizing that light a bit more. And I think I want to create a vignette here. Very subtle. Just going to increase the feather amount. That's going to help emphasize the mood a bit. Okay, so next, just increase a little bit of this shadow, especially on the lion. Drop the exposure down. Add some more whites. I think some of those whites are getting a bit bright. Maybe drop some of those highlights a little bit there. Okay, that's looking definitely closer to what I want. I'm going to zoom into the eyes, and I just want to emphasize the bright section of the eyes. I'm going to go into 200%, get them nice and close. Using a brush, I'm going to increase the whites on the sky reflection in the eyes here only. It's going to almost give the appearance of the eyes being a bit sharper. Maybe increase some exposure as well, not too much. And there's a bit of blue being reflected in the sky there, so I think I might just drop the saturation just on that selection there. Okay, another brush mask. I'm going to increase the saturation on the eyes and then also increase the detail. So I'm going to increase the clarity and some of the texture and perhaps some saturation. And maybe a little bit of white balance just to warm up those eyes just a bit. I just want to connect the viewer a bit more with this lion's eyes here. Okay, so that's looking quite nice. I don't like the color of the image yet, but I'm still just working on the mood of the image. I'm going to give the subject, which I'm going to do here. I'm going to select subject See how it does, selecting the lion. It does a pretty good job. I'm going to add some clarity to the lion. And a bit of texture, just to help that pop. And sometimes what I like to do, let's just zoom in here. I like to add some detail on the mask. I'm just going to increase the sharpness using the sharpness on the mask. I don't do that often, but I think this image might benefit from that. Okay, I think I want to still emphasize the vignette. So I'm going to create a radial gradient and I want to do a custom vignette. So just create that radial gradient over the lion. I'm going to click invert. I'm going to darken down. Then I'm going to counteract that area by just removing what it's done on the left-hand side. So I'm going to go and hit subtract, linear gradient. Don't necessarily want to darken the area where the light's coming from. So I've just removed that vignette effect from that area there. And I think it's time to work on the color. Now I'm going to warm this up a little bit. Add some magenta here. And then go into color grading to add some blue into the shadows. I've noticed lately I'm normally using a value of about 220 here on the hue. Just going to drop that off there, and I want to only place that blue into the very dark areas. And then perhaps just drop this slider here. Maybe increase the effect of that blue slightly. Going to go and warm the image up a little bit more. Add a little bit more tint to counteract that blue. Just want to see what this blue looks like. I think it's looking a bit sort of purple. I'm just going to adjust that slightly there. Make it a bit more towards a cyan color. Okay, two things. I am not liking the green. I want to desaturate the green, and I want the color of the line to be a lot warmer. So I'm going to go to color mixer and go to saturation. I'm going to drop the green saturation. I'm going to click and drag. Just drop that slightly. Also helps simplify the image a bit. I think too much color sometimes makes the image a bit complicated. And then the hue, I'm going to adjust the hue of the line. So I'm going to click on the fur here, click and drag down to make it a bit warmer. So you can see that's made a very nice change there. I think let's just work on some contrast. It's nice and contrasty. Don't want the darks to be too dark, but it definitely does help emphasize that light there. I think I might roll off the blacks here. I don't want anything too jet black, just a nice soft appearance there. All right, that's looking quite nice. I think I want to brighten just this little patch of grass at the back. Maybe just with a very soft linear gradient. Just adding in, even if it's just changing the temperature a little bit. Adding in some more warm color just to kind of match the scene. Or dragging that down. Actually, it makes it look quite nice. Maybe like that. Add in some magenta. I think that's overdoing it a bit, so I'm just going to drop this amount. Just make it subtle there. I feel like that orange on the lines now too saturated, so I'm just going to drop that. And then I'm liking that. I just want to check on the details and on the noise. I don't think it's a very noisy image. It's on ISO 400, which is fine. Detail, I'm just going to sharpen this image, hold down the masking, get rid of the sharpening in the out of focus areas, and then now work on the tone curve just to bring in a bit more contrast. Liking the look of this. And then I feel like the darks are a bit too dark, and then just increase some of the blacks on the slider. Perhaps drop the exposure and just drop some of that contrast. Just to even it out a bit. And then perhaps a little bit on the shadows. And then maybe some nice clarity globally on the image for that effect. Creativity can certainly go a lot deeper than this. And in this video here, I share some great ways to add atmosphere to your wildlife photos in Lightroom.